Tips with Toni. Tips with Toni. All about nutrition from your favorite dietitian. Everything you need to digest in your mind. Tips with Toni. Tips with Toni. Making you healthier one bite at a time. With Toni. Woo.
Hello, and welcome to the Tips with Toni podcast. I'm Toni Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time. As you guys know, I'm on the GymWits Podcast as their co-host regularly, and every once in a while I like to share with you what we talked about there because I think it will be valuable to you. In this episode, we talk about foods that have a healthy halo, aka foods that appear to be super, super healthy when actually if you take a closer look, they're not that healthy. So I want you to enjoy this episode, and definitely when you're done, take a screenshot, put it on your Instagram story or Facebook story, and tag me at TipsWithToni. Without further ado, here's the episode.
GymWits, if you want to know the truth about fitness, from workout fads and diet myths, hitting past power lifts. GymWits, that's right.
Ryan,
Toni,
and
Crystal.
we can't guarantee that you're gonna look great, but if you wanna stay in shape, well, you better hit the GymWits. That's right, man.
welcome to the GymWits Podcast. I'm Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, a.k.a. Chef Sonic.
And I'm Toni Marinucci, aka Tips with Toni, your registered dietitian.
And we are the GymWits. So an action-packed episode
Yeah, we do.
of the podcast today. But I guess first, if you've been on our website or... No, not our website. Crap, I got to do that.
You didn't even put it up to our website. Oh, man.
I have to do it. I'll do it. I got to get it on the website. But yeah, our logo has changed after about 2 years. So it's pretty cool. Whoever did it did a great job because it's not the person that did the original logo, but it basically looks like the original kind of artist did it.
Yeah, I made sure. So actually, we should probably shout him out. It's a friend of mine. His name is Darren, and I had him. Basically, I said we need the logo to look just like this, but I need to be in it. So let me see if I can find his name on Instagram. But also, Ryan, you just reminded me that I should send you a new photo of myself or the bio on the website.
Sure. Yeah, I got to make some changes to the website anyway. So if you want to, if you need to send me any updated,
Yeah.
All our listeners need to hear this stuff,
exactly.
right?
Exactly. Well, this is just delaying so that you can find his Instagram.
So Darren Norman it's DNORMA artist. So D Norm artist.
So
There
yeah,
you
if
go.
you need a
logo design.
yeah, he does a
He did it
great
super
job.
fast.
And fast too.
Super fast.
He really did do it very fast.
Even like when we had little edits, like he edited it within, like, it felt like I emailed you. You would email me like, "Hey, look at this. What do you think?" And I'd say, "Okay, can you change X, Y, and Z?" And then I get an email from you like an hour later.
I'm not gonna lie. I think he did it because like I'm a good friend, but because I
Still
referred
great.
him to somebody else, and they said the turnaround was a week, which still though is pretty
Yeah,
fast.
no,
That's still great. That's
Yeah.
still great. And it was
So-
professional and yeah, it was really cool.
Yay! I'm officially a gymwit.
Nice, yeah. So yeah, we do have a jam-packed episode today, and when we get into the meat of it, first, Ryan, did you read that article I sent you? Toni, did you read it as well?
I opened it. I read a little bit of it, a few paragraphs.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Why don't you explain it? There's a good episode of I believe it's This American Life that came out this week that deals with something similar. I'll explain it after you explain what you saw in the article.
So basically, a woman put her kid to sleep for a nap, and the kid had a small fever. And when she went to wake him up, he had unfortunately passed away. He was a very young child, and she made posts, pictures of him, probably cute pictures and family pictures and things like that. And then all of a sudden, she started getting attacked by anti-vaxxers who started calling her all sorts of horrible names and telling her that she killed her she killed her son, that she's at fault, and lots of expletives, and then they started harassing her as well. They harassed her husband, things like that. So it's pretty horrendous.
Yeah. Well, yeah. We talked about this the other day in an episode. I think we'll post it as a bonus before this goes out. But we were talking about kind of just the anti-vax movement and a lot of the anti-science stuff. And it's bad enough, to kind of not vaccinate your kid or to deny that they're effective and et cetera, et cetera. But it's another step to like harass a parent of a child that's just like, it's just an awful thing. There was an episode of This American Life, I believe it was This American Life, where they were talking about, it was similar, but with people whose kids died in Sandy Hook, and that you have this whole group of people now who, as soon as there's like a big mass killing, they immediately claim that it's like a false flag, that it's that they're crisis actors,
conspiracy,
and it's like insane that you'd have these grieving parents, and then not only do they have to grieve for the death of their kid, but they have to then deal with these insane people who claim who are just harassing them for no reason. And it's awful. No matter what your position is on it, it's just an awful thing to do, and it just is. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, and one thing that got me is that they, in the article, which we will post in the show notes, feel free to read it. It's a CNN article. They talked to some of the heads of the anti-vaxxer movement, and from them, the quotes, and I don't know what they said in their entirety, but to me, they seemed very blasé about these things. They would say, "Oh, we don't condone harassment," or people, if there are infiltrators who are just being incendiary, we don't, we don't associate with them. But it felt very weak and very blasé to me, where okay, you can have your stance, you can have your opinion, but I feel something like that, if you're the head of a movement, to come out and say, this is, reprehensible what these people did. They are not sensitive. We do not associate with them. These are not part of, this is, as far as I'm concerned, this is not part of the anti-vaxxer anti-vaccination movement. These are not our people. Yeah. Right. To me, that's what a good person does. Yeah. Instead, this person, whoever's in the head, in typical fashion, was very weak, and because who knows, maybe they are in favor of this. Behavior. To me, it seems like either they're in favor of the behavior or they just don't care, and that to them there's a bigger goal, and that if this sort of things happen, it's collateral damage. That's how they see it. That's what I got the sense of.
Well, yeah, I mean, the part of it is they see it as, oh, look, see, that person got vaccinated and they still died, so they must be, it's like it proves their point. And then I don't know, the article kind of touches on a little bit like, why there's such a concerted effort to do that. Like, what's the strategy behind, so aggressively attacking somebody? I think it still comes down, a lot to this internet. There's kind of mindset
people that are
internet,
cowards,
that you're in this group and that they're the enemy and that there's this thing and it's the enemy and it becomes a target and for what it's worth, like even for us, like if one of these people were to hear this and then they decide we're going to target them, they could do a lot of damage to you between finding your address, finding your information, doxing your websites, leaving reviews.
And of course, people like that would never come up to our face and say it because they're cowards.
Of course not. But they'll do it, behind a keyboard, and they can be, at least effective as far as like harassing people and really, drive them crazy, and it's frustrating. And you mentioned like you can have your opinions, and it's like I would also say you can have your opinions, and this is me paraphrasing somebody else, but like you can have your opinions, but you can't have the facts. And what it comes down to is just a lack of understanding of basic science, and then you combine that with kind of this conspiracy mindset and that part of the internet, that dark, dirty part of the internet where people can kind of, just the grime coalesces and becomes just something disgusting and inflammatory. And then you kind of pick a target, and it's one of, it's what, there are many great things about the internet and there are many awful things, and that's one of the worst.
It's sad. My thought of a lot of that, like hate crimes or just bullying in general, like if you put all that energy into loving yourself or doing something productive, like this world would be a much better place. People spend way too much time focused on other people's, what they're like, just bringing negativity to this world, which is the last thing we absolutely need.
No, it's true. And you see a lot of this with movements that at least are meant to do good, to do positive things. And I'm sure for people that are part of the anti-vax movement, they're in it for genuinely good reasons, as far as they know to them, right? They believe that vaccinations are bad, that they're causing autism, which we know is not proven at all, or making people more sick, or some part of big pharma conspiracy. Who knows what it is? But to them, it's actually a good thing. Sort of similar to PETA, who the idea behind it is good. Like, we want ethical treatment for animals. But as we know, PETA has done some pretty terrible things. And they've done good stuff, but they've done bad stuff too. So oftentimes what they say, the road to ruin is paved with good intentions.
Yeah, you're right to an extent. I think you've got different people in those. Like, you're gonna have some people who are legitimately, maybe they had, they got really sick, or they know somebody that died from a vaccine, because like we've talked about before, there a certain percentage of people are going to die from a vaccine, and the whole idea is that, yes, with any of these, there will be a very, very, very small percentage that are going to die, but you're going to save people orders of magnitude, on scales of orders of magnitude greater. So yes, the 1 or 2 is sad, and it's not that you should just discount it, but that it's far exceeded by what would happen if you don't. And then you also have you have the percent that either won't be affected by the vaccine, and you have the percent that can't take the vaccine. And so by vaccinating everybody else, you're able to protect that group. And that that's where we have these outbreaks, when you have in these areas, these pockets of the world where there are these,
And the article
these
talked about a child who died because the child was too young to be vaccinated. Yeah. So they went with the herd, what was it called? The herd, what's the word? Immunity type deal, where where everyone builds up immunity, but it didn't work.
No, yeah.
The kid died because it was in a very low percentage vaccination part of the world, and potentially because of that, the kid got exposed to it because other people weren't vaccinated, and then unfortunately passed away.
So that's the problem. Is so you have some people who fall into that. There's a real reason why, and it may not be rooted in science, but it's rooted in emotion, which is an important thing, and you can't discount emotion. But then you're going to have the people that are just conspiracy theorists, and they're going to buy into anything. They'll buy into that. They'll buy into look, we've got a not insignificant amount of people that think the earth is flat. There are like legitimate flat earthers. It's not like we still say it as a joke, but there's enough people that it's not. Or there are people that think that the moon landing was faked, which again, that's something like why believe it? And I think for a lot, there are just people that are just ready to buy into that. So yes, there's some that mean well, or at least look, the people that are actively attacking people who have dealt with tragedy, they're disgusting scum of the earth. Then you have people that mean well, they're just not informed, and obviously can be a little bit more sympathetic towards them, but I hope there's a place in hell for the people who are going to reach out to a mother whose child just died and send them inflammatory comments. Like I'm not a religious person. I don't believe in an afterlife, but if there is, I hope that they spend their life being dumped into a blender just over and over, like a giant human-sized blender, just over and over. But
or being forced to take or vaccinations.
That would be great.
But like nasty vaccinations that actually do give you rabies and things like that.
Oh my goodness.
That's a good idea.
Like the needle that just says autism on it, and they just get injected with that.
It was what was that cartoon when we were young? It was ironic punishment, where the kid who was eating was forced to go on a conveyor belt where they force fed him. Right. I think they parodied it on either The Simpsons or Family Guy or something like that. But where it was I think Homer or something that was put on the conveyor belt to be force fed, but he ate everything, so it backfired.
I don't remember it, but it sounds like something.
All right. I don't know how we got there. As often we go on tangents. So
yes,
I guess that's
since we just released a long rant on vaccinations and all that stuff, we can end it here before I go on another rant, and people are okay, you're saying the same stuff.
It's less about the vaccinations, more about the people doing it.
Yeah, exactly. Like that, they're scum. But We'll
Okay.
stop.
There we go. All right. So what's the main point of the meat of? Oh wait, that's right. There's always sorts of fun. You got some studies.
we have so
and a question too.
Toni has an email.
Yeah,
that-
we want to do that?
Yeah, we could do the email first.
All right, so this question comes from Emily, and she had listened to the emotional eating episode, and she said, "Thank you, I really resonated with that. I've been struggling a little bit, having a tough time, and want to kind of just stay in my house alone, and which leads to overeating." And Emily and I know Emily, she's part of my healthy lifestyle support group that I have on Facebook. And I know a lot more about her. So this was a little easier for me to answer because I have the background where sometimes people write in, I don't know too much, but she said a really good, she gave us a little bit of a lengthy background that can help a little bit. So she said that basically she's been trying, so her goal is actually muscle mass. She wants to gain muscle mass. She has a history of restrictive eating. Obviously, we just talked about emotional eating. So she's been eating more. And so this is what she said. I've been trying not to weigh myself lately since I've been increasing my calories. I just don't want to feel guilty for gaining weight, even though I know I need the extra calories. Anyway, I'd weighed myself today for the first time in a while, and I've actually lost some weight. Like 7 pounds over 3 months, which seems like a lot to me since I've been trying to do so. She's been trying to gain weight. So I've heard this is normal when eating restrictions are lifted, but I just want to hear it directly from you. Haha. If I keep my calories steady as they are now, should plateau and stop losing, right? I have more energy and feel better, but this is still a little alarming for me. I want to put on a bit more muscle, not lose it. Is this water weight? So basically my response to her was it could be a lot of things. She hasn't weighed herself in 3 months, so we don't know how her weight normally fluctuates, for one. Number two, she's changed her way of eating and exercise regimen, so we have to be able to monitor that. So I encouraged her that if she feels comfortable to get back on the scale, we can just use it as a form of measurement. It doesn't mean she needs to change her diet. It doesn't mean she needs to change her exercise regimen. We just need it as a data point so we can assess how she normally fluctuates. In general, the most important thing that she said is she's feeling better. She has more energy. So that's great. What I encouraged her to do was to slowly, if she, her goal is muscle mass, then she slowly does want to increase her calories, but weight gain never feels good on anyone, whether you're underweight, at a healthy weight, overweight. Just gaining weight just is uncomfortable. So you don't want to do it too much too soon. So I basically told her to just track her weight for about a month, keep doing what she's doing. If there's still no change and she continues to plateau and the weight doesn't go back up, then she definitely wants to slowly increase her calories by using things like healthy fats and protein. So she can do things like protein shakes, protein bars, adding things like nut butters, olive oil, dips like hummus and guacamole, but do it slowly over time. So that way, one, it's controllable and repeatable. And then two, we can assess what's helpful and what's not. Ryan, maybe you have something to add to that? Is there something in her training that she could be doing better?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's something. Yeah, well, you made a great point as far as just data points. The more data you have, the more you're able to identify and diagnose issues, and then come up with a plan of action. So, yeah, as much as kind of it may be mentally, tough, or you may struggle mentally to kind of see the weight creep up, it helps us figure out kind of what plan of action. As far as the weights, just make sure lifting heavy. Heavier weights, heavy resistance training will help. That might also, the body is a machine that, if nothing else, it kind of adapts to stress. So one adaptation might just be increased hunger, due to the demand of the weights. If you're lifting more heavier weights and you need to put on muscle, there's a good chance you're going to be hungrier. It's just a common thing, and that may help you eat a little bit more, which will help you increase the weight, and also increase in lean weight. So, if you're eating at a level that you're trying to gain, but you're not exercising appropriately, then even if you do put on weight, it may or may not be kind of what you want. So the more muscle that you can put on and lean weight, the better. So I'd just say make sure that the weight training program is, heavy resistance training, that is progressive, that your weights are moving up as much as you can, and that's all I really would add right now. Otherwise, I think just keep track of what you're doing and your weights.
And I'm kind of curious, so she could be putting on muscle mass, but the weight necessarily might not change because it could just be her body composition changing,
Yeah. So
right?
if the body composition changes, then you're right. Like that could. The only problem is it's really hard. Like it's really hard to lose. It's hard to lose weight and put on muscle, and it's hard to lose fat and gain muscle in a short period. You can do it over a long period of time, where but where your natural body fluctuate in weight. But it's a little bit of a challenge for somebody to do both, this, like to kind of lose a lot of fat and gain a lot of muscle at the same time. Not that it's impossible, and kind of some people are kind of genetically predisposed to it, but it's not impossible. And it's it's quite possible that most of those 7 pounds, especially if the diet's been as good as it's been, and she's been exercising, that most of that 7 pounds is fat. Weight.
So is there any way to tell if you've been, well, I'm sure there is, but what's a reasonable way to tell if you've actually gained muscle?
Body composition, to do some kind of body fat analysis before and after.
Do you think it would be worth?
Yeah, I would say chances are she's not, like, unless maybe her gym might have something that's a little bit more high tech, but they have the little baby machine. What are they? Bioelectric? They use bioelectrical impedance.
Yeah.
What are those called? The like handheld thing.
It's like a handheld bioelectrical impedance.
Yeah, so like that. I mean, they're not 100% accurate, but they give you sort of like a good. They might be slightly, I guess, tainted by like if you're hydrated or not, or like certain things. But for the most part, it tends to be a good range.
I would say it may be better to do inches. Like I would say it's better to get somebody that measures. Just make sure that it's somebody that can do it consistently, because you get some people who they could measure you twice in the span of 30 seconds, and they're going to give you 2 different numbers. So I might say go with somebody that can do it consistently, but measurements might be a little bit better, especially for your purpose, because I think body fat, especially with body fat's the same thing. If you have a trainer that does it the right way with the calipers, I think that's always the best, because you're going to get a fairly consistent change, where the machines will drive you crazy. Mm-hmm. And especially because she mentioned that she doesn't like to check regularly, because it was almost like a mental block, or almost like a psychological fear of gaining the weight, even though kind of intellectually she knows that, or an emotional, I should say, like her emotions are going to supersede kind of the intellectual component that knows that the weight is supposed to go up. Seeing the body fat go up and down can be frustrating, especially when you're not sure. And so I would almost say measurements might be best. Like, pick, okay, I want to gain inches. Most people want to gain inches on their biceps if they're trying to get stronger. So you can, you got your biceps measurement. Most people want to lose, on their hips or on their waist when they're trying to lose weight. So you can kind of keep those measurements, and then you can then see that. So if the areas where you'd like to build muscle start growing a little bit, and the areas that you'd like to lose some fat, shrink a little bit, then you're heading in the right direction. So I might go with that. But again, no matter what, it's got to be a person that you trust is going to do an accurate measure each time. Otherwise, again, you run into that issue of like, it may change a lot, and sometimes not. It's not like, I've had people with the bioelectrical impedance who, like, they lost 5 pounds, but then they saw that the body fat went up for whatever reason, and then they freak out. So you just want to be careful. Although the other opposite works too, where I've seen people gain weight, but then the body fat goes down, so they're like, oh, this is great, I don't care. So you just got to be a little careful, especially if you know that you're kind of susceptible to your emotions kind of
dictating dictating your actions.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Cool. Cool. All right, so we've got some studies to go over. Okay, so we got a nutrition study and a fitness study. One very large study, one very small. So this one is on so we've done a couple recently on the Mediterranean diet. So this one is whether or not the Mediterranean diet can help endurance. And so they basically tested the Mediterranean diet, which kind of is characterized by high amounts of fruits and vegetables, nuts, olive oils. They avoid things like red meat, processed meat, dairy, trans fats, and they compared it to Western diet, which is generally low in fruits and vegetables, high in red meat and processed meat, high sodium, lots of processed foods, lots of refined sugars, et cetera, et cetera. And which one do you guys think produced the better results for cardiovascular endurance?
Gee, I wonder.
Well, it was only 7. It was 7 women and 4 men. It was a study by researchers at the University of St. Louis, or St. Louis University. So, you take it with a huge grain of salt. But what they did is they basically did 2 trials of a 5K. One trial was after 4 days of a Mediterranean style diet. One trial was after 4 days of a Western style diet. And so they found that basically, on average, they performed 6% faster after doing the Mediterranean diet. And they, it's a little tricky with something like this because, it's hard to kind of control for, if you're eating, it's pretty easy to see which diet's healthier. And then just by that, you may convince yourself that you're going to run better, and then you actually do run better. So, again, you take it with a huge grain of salt on this one. But, the measures that they did use to compare them were their heart rate and the rate of perceived exertion, which is kind of how hard you think you're working. And what they found basically was that they had a similar heart rate and rate of perceived exertion in each trial, but they ran 6% faster after the Mediterranean diet. So, again, very small study. It kind of states the obvious, and even so, you're not going to, say, okay, that's it, that settles it. The Mediterranean diet's better, but it's just an interesting one. For me.
Yeah. I mean, I don't find it interesting at all. In fact, I find it stupid. I think it's one of the worst studies that we've ever had on here, and I'll tell you why. Because they've made the decision that what the Western diet is, right? So Western diet, yeah, maybe it has more red meat, maybe it has more processed foods, but that's how much of that is consumed is up to the person. And there are a lot of people in the West. There's a lot. There's a lot of people in the United States. There's a lot of people in Canada and in Europe, right? And now, so is Europe considered the West? Right? It's considered you often say Western countries. So it's stupid if you ask me, right? What you can compare someone like Toni who eats tons of fruits and vegetables and very little processed food and little sugar, right? And you're going to compare that to someone down the street who eats a ton of that. It's a really stupid. And it achieves nothing.
I think you're completely wrong. But Toni, what do you think before?
It achieves nothing.
Well,
so what about to me a more reasonable approach was to put it against something that there was an intake of similar healthy foods but different foods. So maybe if you were consuming lots of fruits and vegetables, but one had more red meat or something like that, that would make more sense. Or one had more sugar, right? Even though they were consuming similar foods. But when you're consuming foods that are so drastically different, and you're calling something the Western diet, right? Which to me, that's my biggest issue with it. The Western diet. The people who made the study took it on themselves to create a diet. Right, so to me it's stupid, and it doesn't prove anything. Not to mention the fact that there's only 11 people in the study. The whole thing sounds like a farce to me.
Should I go first? You want to go?
Well, okay. No, God. Well, basically,
It doesn't matter what you say, Ryan. I'm going to edit it out. So no, I'm just kidding.
No. Well, the Western diets, they're basically just taking the general. It's just like the Mediterranean. In the Mediterranean diet is taking multiple cultures together, and there's plenty of people in the that live in the Mediterranean.
No one who made the Mediterranean who eats junk food.
Exactly. So they're basically just taking the general of the trend of how people eat in the Mediterranean versus how people eat in the Western culture. So it really is the general thing. But I think I see your point. I get what you're saying. But
it's also a no shit Sherlock study.
Well,
That's what it should have been called.
Well, so okay,
it should have been called the no shit Sherlock study.
All right, so I said that. Okay, so here's the situation. Here's where you're completely wrong. Well, as Toni already said, yes, there's no, quote, Western diet, but that's how it is with everything. There's no Western media, but we kind of know what media is like.
There's
here.
a Western
There's
omelet.
No Western. Yeah,
you go to a Western diner anywhere. Western omelet's pretty much the same thing.
Obviously, when we're dealing with any generalization, you're talking about, we talk about how dumb Americans are. Not all Americans are dumb. Most Americans might not be dumb, but there's a certain amount that are kind of dumb, or not dumb, but ignorant of certain things because we're not educated a certain way. But some Americans are educated. So of course, when we make generalizations, that's how that's how it's done. You have to do that. So obviously, they're taking as what are aspects of what typical Western diets. They are low in fruits and vegetables. Yeah. They are high in red meat. Yeah. They are high in processed foods. That's just part of our diet. Obviously, not everybody eats the same. And if you live in like a cosmopolitan city like New York or San Francisco or LA, you're gonna have far more people eating far healthier, but you just go to the middle of the country and it changes quickly, so obviously, and that's how studies are done. So now the other part is even I said it is like a no shit Sherlock study, but at the end of the day, that's how research is done. And so we don't know what kind of funding they had. We don't know, much, but let's say you have very little funding, but you have your hypothesis, which is, so when we look
very
at,
little funding, very few people, obviously.
Let me explain. Right, so you have a situation where the Mediterranean diet has been pretty heavily researched for health purposes, which has been shown to be one of the healthier diets out there. Or even it's even hard to say diet because it's just the way people eat, right? Even Western diet, it's just generally the way people eat. But there hasn't been a lot of research on performance. So there's not a ton out there on how do people perform on that kind of a diet. Is that a type of diet I would want to give to my runners? If I'm an athlete, if I'm a coach, should I recommend that type of diet to them? Or do I have to make other dietary recommendations for their performance? So if you look and you're like, oh, well, there's not a lot of research done. I'm a researcher. Let's start with something. We'll start with a small hypothesis that the Western diet is better for performance. Let's test it out. Okay, I've got a few people. We're going to do a very small study. Let's just see the results. Interesting. The results pretty good. It's a small study, but I got decent results.
You mean the Mediterranean diet for
So Mediterranean diet for performance. Okay. So here they have their hypothesis. They run a very small study. Obviously, they're not saying, consensus. Now that's it. But they run a small study
like
that
a
seems
review.
Yeah, and it seems to confirm that hypothesis. So now you do another study and you make it more vigorous and you add more variables. You add a placebo group. You add more people. That's how science is done. So you generally have to start small. You think they're going to get funding for a study that deals with 100,000 people, or there's enough studies out there to do some kind of a review, or that's how you start. That's how you do science. So to call it stupid like that,
I think it's stupid.
There's if you go through, I forget the name of it, if it's like the Ig Nobel Prize or if that's something else, but like where they had these ridiculous studies that on the face of it just looks dumb. Like why do we need this? But again, that's how science is done, and you have to start somewhere.
I agree with starting somewhere, but if we're trying to prove that the Mediterranean diet is good for performance, you need to put it up against at least a diet that would be considered healthy by some standard, and that most whether most athletes or most people that are into every sport is performance based, right? But how many even middle tier athletes are going to eat? Have a terrible diet.
Here's the thing.
To me, it would make much more sense. All right, how about a Western style diet, but at least make it somewhat comparable with with a little healthy foods, right? To me, that's a diet that tells a lot more about the efficacy of the Mediterranean diet.
No, I don't think so.
Well, I do I think what he's saying is like, once again, everything's in extremes, right? Yeah. So like, not most people aren't completely eating one way and completely the other way. A lot of people are eating in between. Yeah, especially athletes.
Well, yeah, no, so I understand that, and obviously for future studies, that's something you would want to do. But let's say if you're doing your initial study, it makes sense, because what if you're a coach or if you're dealing with athletes in the U.S., they're more likely than not going to be eating a Western style diet. So it's a very simple study here. It's like, all right, I want to see the effectiveness of the Mediterranean diet. Instead of comparing it to a Western-ish diet, a Western light diet, or comparing it to some red, it's like, okay, let's compare it to just what the normal person does here in the U.S. Very simple way to start it. And again, obviously there's going to be dozens, hundreds more studies to come that, fine tune it and compare against different things. But I think as far as like, what's my first study? Let's just look at it compared to the normal, and then we go from there. So I see your point, but again, there's kind of like, there's a process. And so, it is kind of, as a lot of these studies are, it confirms the obvious, but it gives you some base to start with, which is, on this initial study, it looks like it's not bad. And again, it's not finished. Maybe it turns out the Western diet's still better for performance, but the point is you got to start somewhere, and we can spend weeks figuring out, okay, what if we're going to conduct our own study. Let's say we wanted to do a study on the effectiveness of high intensity interval training, which is actually the next interesting study, right? But let's say we're going to conduct our own study. We got 10 participants. We could spend months arguing over what parameters we want to work with. Do we want to take people who are, do we want to compare interval training to people who do other kinds of training, to non-fit people, to non-athletes, to athletes? Like you could spend forever trying to figure it out. So, I don't think it's necessary to critique that. You might want to critique aspects of the study itself, of the design. Clearly it's small, but again, they're not making great claims with it. It's just so.
No,
so I think you can look at the design and criticize it. There's plenty there, but again, you gotta kind of have to look at the scale. And if this was a massive study, like let's say there was, they had 40,000 people participate in this study. Then I might say, okay, maybe you needed to be a little bit more strict, a little bit, maybe certain parts. But no, it's a small study. Interesting result. Fits nicely into interesting studies. Well, the most important thing for me for interesting studies is that
it's more into an uninteresting study.
Well, you're wrong because it got discussion. Because when sometimes I do these studies and then there's no discussion.
Fair enough.
So anything else?
We'll continue this debate for another time.
All right, so this one's on interval training, that it may cut more weight. Okay, so it compares basically how much weight people lose doing interval training versus doing kind of continuous lower or moderate intensity cardiovascular activity. So this was published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine. So for this one, researchers kind of took data from a number of studies. I think it was 41 studies that totaled over 1,000 people, 1,100 people. Now, in this case, they were using only studies that compared interval training to regular.
I think if it was the other group that did the study, it would be comparing who's healthier, people who do interval training compared to people who play video games. So the group that did interval training, it was found out that they lost 12% more weight. They had a better heart rate, right? So that's what they found, right?
Okay. Yeah, exactly. Right. I'm glad you're not leading any of these studies. So anyway, researchers took data from studies comparing interval training and long cardio. So it wasn't, they weren't separate. Each one compared the two. And the studies were of at least 4 weeks. So they wanted to determine what's more effective, longer steady state cardio or, high intensity interval training. And what they found was that both reduced weight and body fat. So no matter which one you do, you're likely going to reduce weight and body fat. Obviously, before you jump in and start telling me how you got to eat well and all this stuff, obviously there are other variables.
I wasn't going to say that.
Generally, both are going to reduce weight and body fat.
I like this study.
But while they found that the body fat change was effectively the same, in this review, interval training actually had a 28.5% greater reduction in average weight. So they actually found that interval training was more effective for weight loss. And then to go even further, sprint training had an even greater effect on weight loss. But then there are other variables to consider. So for example, with sprinting, you have to consider, physical capabilities, age. There's then the risk of there's injury risk, cardiovascular stress. So there are other things to consider. But based on this review, at least, they found that high intensity interval training was more effective for weight loss than kind of longer duration cardio.
Now, is that question, say you were to do 2 hours of a very low.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
what's the?
Is it like you're saving time, or is it because your heart rate's going up and that's burning more fat?
That's a good question. So the problem with this is, since it's a review of kind of literature, each study is going to kind of tackle it from a different perspective. So, some of the studies may be looking at like a Tabata style high intensity thing, where others might be looking at like a 30-second on, 2-minute off thing. And then same thing with the cardio. Some might be looking at an hour long thing versus others that might be looking at 40 minutes or an hour and a half. So it's a little tricky. We're not sure why, what the reason is for the weight loss. I would, in general with the interval training, it's it's kind of a quality over quantity type of thing. So I think that there are a few things going on. I think one is it increases, and this is my, just opinion, but, increases your metabolism, which is going to help a little bit, as far as burning on the rebound. So like once you're done with the exercise, right, you're burning a little bit more post-workout. But I think beyond that, to me, it's more a function of you're getting more fit doing the high intensity interval training. So the more fit you get, the more likely you are to continue. So I think, on a micro level, which I'd be interested in seeing studies.
You mean continue being consistent?
So
do you mean by that?
I'm sure there's studies on this, like kind of on a micro level, how much are you burning per bout of exercise? If you do a 4-minute super intense bout of Tabata, is that going to burn as much as doing an hour on the treadmill? Probably not.
I understand.
But that 4-minute bout, longer term, may get you more fit. So there's certain kind of your VO2 max increases. You're going to become stronger. So there are a lot of benefits to the high intensity interval training that are not just weight loss, but actually kind of your overall fitness level. And so just the more fit you become, the more likely you are to keep up and keep doing it. So, I would be interested in seeing, is it, because the weight loss that they sustain, we all know, like weight loss is more the diet than anything else. So you can eat those calories back pretty quickly, and so that's why we try not to teach people to lose weight on the treadmill. There are benefits to cardio that aren't, the weight loss is minimal compared to the actual diet. So I just think that it's more about high intensity interval training being more effective mode of exercise. It's shorter, it's less time consuming. And there are a lot of things that go with it that will lead to the weight loss. So the weight loss is kind of an ancillary benefit. It's not the direct, it's like not a direct result of it. But again, that's kind of my opinion to an extent. I want to look at, but it would be interesting to see like how much do you lose doing, does the average person lose, again, doing an hour of, moderate cardio versus doing let's say a 10-minute bout of, high intensity interval training.
Yeah. I definitely think it's also person specific, like anything, in the sense of like recovery time. Like I know when I do lots of cardio, for me, my body takes a lot longer to recover when I do more. I don't know why. My body just is like, it's cardio is exhausting to me. Maybe I'm not fueling properly because it could be nutrition related. But I definitely think that people's bodies respond to different sorts of activities differently, and I think that will go along with, like, if you're consistent with it, that's obviously how you're going to get the best results.
Yeah. And there's the challenge with interval training is always that the intensity is so high that it's not for everyone.
Right.
But you spend such little time doing it that you lose that. For a lot of people, the time of exercise is an obstacle.
Right.
And so you kind of, weighing those together, if you're able to do the high intensity training, you get all the benefits of it. Plus you don't have to spend as much time on it.
Yeah.
And I would also think that the recovery is a little bit easier from high intensity training because there's not a lot of repetitions. Like I found for me too, when I'm, if I was training for a fight, like I never do long bouts of cardio, but when I would train, I would do, I'd run, and, I felt it was exhausting the day after my long run where I could do sprints, pretty fast and at pretty high level, and I'll feel fine the next day.
Yeah, and the psychology of it is, like you said, like, all right, I got 20 minutes. Yeah. I got to put it in 20 minutes
exactly.
And then I'm out. And I agree.
So if you can deal with that mental issue, it's much, much more manageable.
I agree.
All right, cool. So anything else to add before we get into our main discussion point an hour into the podcast? Yeah.
No, that there's a study like that brings about a lot of questions, but it's a good, I think it's, that adds some valuable knowledge for us.
Unlike the first one?
Unlike the first one.
When it sounds too good to be true, when you're really not sure just what you should do, look around, chances are you're on BS Corner. That's Bull Corner.
Okay, so I was in Times Square the other day, and like many native New Yorkers, we try to avoid Times Square like the plague. Ryan, do you like going to Times Square?
No, I hate it.
Yeah, like we don't like it for any number of reasons. But while I was there, I think it was I had a meeting or something for work, and I look up, and there's an enormous one of those video billboard type things, or one that changes its, I don't know what you would even call it, some sort of billboard. And it showed, it looked like a Calvin Klein commercial where you had beautiful models. Everyone was in their 20s and 30s. Like one guy had his shirt open. You could see his ripped abs. One woman was looked like a sports bikini type deal. And does that exist? Type thing? It was sort of like a bikini, but it would look like it was an athletic style. Like, do you have clothing? Like, is there a proper term for that, Tone?
It's like I don't know. It would be a sports bra and
like a sports bra and something. It was
And
clearly yeah. There wasn't the woman wasn't dressed very much, but she was in great shape, and it was clear that she was. And everyone in the everyone in the ad was like a young and good looking and really in shape and really healthy, and it was very clear that that's what it was. And then if you look what the ad was for, it was for pistachios. And it was basically saying pistachios, implying that it's a healthy food for you to eat. And I'm thinking, all right, well, we know pistachios is a healthy food, and it certainly can be incorporated into a diet where you could look like that. Mm-hmm. But of course, looking like that has nothing to do with whether you eat pistachios or not.
right.
So I just found it to be so ridiculous that it was over the top. Like if you want to say, all right, pistachios is a healthy food that you should eat it, fine. But I think they went so far, it was bordering on ridiculous to think, for anyone to think that by just eating, by eating pistachios means you look like that.
Yeah.
I think this is the dumbest BS corner ever. No.
Ryan was waiting for that.
He was waiting to put it down. To put it down. No, definitely. Because what's going to happen is someone's going to see that now, and they're going to put pistachios on everything and not do anything else, change anything else about their diet, not change their exercise, and just eat pistachios and hope that they get a six-pack.
Yes.
I mean, yeah.
Or do you think that are people going to do that, or do you think people are going to say that, or do you think some people are going to say, this is ridiculous? I know that eating pistachios aren't
I'm sure some people
both,
will,
yeah.
but...
I mean, if you're that dumb to put pistachios on everything, you're probably not vaccinating your kids. So.
Oh my gosh, Ryan! We're going to get a lot of hate now.
But no.
So according to them, if I eat pistachio ice cream, then I'll look like that.
Well, no, but don't even joke, though. That is something that people will perceive now. And it happens all the time. It happens all the time. Actually, it goes into our list of foods. I could maybe, I don't know, can we segue?
Yeah, well, yeah.
And
Because I have a thought about that, actually.
Yeah. So,
well, we know nuts in general can be very healthy, but they are high in fat and calories, and they could be healthy, but it has to be part of an overall
I think it's
diet.
marketing. Unless they're saying that pistachios, which we see often with marketing campaigns, like unless they're actually saying that like it's associated with, a longer life or with getting a six-pack or something, like it's marketing. It's like wearing Calvin Klein, whatever, brand, does their clothes, like they're showing you really attractive, in shape people. That doesn't mean that by wearing that clothes you're going to look like that, and it's doing effectively the same thing. So it's just using, it's doing what everybody's done ever. So ironically,
it's doing what everybody's done. It's just we're going to call it out, just like we would ridiculous advertisements.
But it's not. I mean, it's advertising. I think any advertising like that, you can look at it as ridiculous, or you can look at it as it's marketing, and it's in Times Square. I mean.
Yeah, but this happens to be one that's involving your health.
Yeah,
right?
but does McDonald's, when McDonald's does their advertising, they always have good-looking people on their ads.
Yeah, but they don't advertise it as something that you can eat to look like that.
I don't know. I'm like, it's marketing.
Of course it is. Look, no question. People can market things however they want, as long as they're not making claims.
Did they make any claims in the ad?
No, but the implication was that you're going to look like that. Absolutely.
Really?
You don't. I 100%. Because it was like, it said the healthy food, like even they might even mention something about being guilt-free or the healthy food, like stuff like that. And it's just, I don't know.
Well, also there's the opposite of that. Like I remember growing up in the 90s, like Britney Spears would be like with Pepsi, and it's like she would have this body and drinking Pepsi, and like it's like as if you can drink all the Pepsi you want and have this, and like no, you can't.
Yeah.
They're like, so it's like the opposite, right? It's just all over the place, and that's why we have so many it's so confusing. In the media.
There's a larger issue of
or beer
deceptive marketing.
Yeah.
That's a problem in itself.
But it's our job to help people realize that, and a lot of our listeners already know that, but hey, you never know. Just if they're showing beautiful people in a commercial telling you that if you eat something, implying that you could look like that through this food.
Let's get real. Like they could be advertising kale, and it would still be misleading because you're still not going to look like that unless you're exercising.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, but
I agree. So anytime, like,
so we
you just have
so
to.
if it
Well,
was
it's
up
about
to-
the whole health, the whole topic we're going to talk about today. It's like foods getting these health halos and claiming to be like the answer to your solutions, or just like these conceptions of like they're really good for you, or maybe they're not good for you. But either way, it doesn't. We know one food doesn't make or break the diet.
So as somebody who, and I guess I'll put this to both of you because I know Justin was saying the other day like how he's fairly libertarian. Would you want laws to restrict advertising like that?
No, I think that advertisers.
okay.
I think it's 100% okay for them to do
They
it.
just need to be called out by us.
I say, yeah, you could feel free to advertise however you want, as long as you don't make bogus claims.
Okay.
Right. But if you're gonna, but just understand, you're gonna advertise like that, you're gonna get called out by people like us.
and our 10 listeners.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, that's 10 less people that are gonna buy pistachios. Actually, I think I'm gonna go buy pistachios. They're pretty yummy.
I actually do like pistachios.
I like pistachio ice cream too, more than I like pistachios.
All right. Well, so I guess we can say anything to add to that,
No,
Toni?
let's get into
Okay, so we
it.
can segue into our episode, which is foods with food halos. So basically, foods that maybe we think are healthier than they are, and they could be some foods that are just outright unhealthy, or some that are not bad for you, but they get a reputation as being far more healthy than they really are. So so I guess why don't you start? What would you say what's the worst culprit?
I want to say the worst culprit, but the one that definitely comes to mind is I think when people first start.
Wait. So what is the worst culprit?
I don't really have a worse culprit. I just definitely like pre-made smoothies or juicing. So a lot of people will they're trying to eat healthier, so they'll go to the store. They'll see like naked smoothies or cold pressed juice or whatever, and they go to grab those, and they don't look on the bottle, and they realize that. Even like a green smoothie, for example, where it claims to be mostly vegetables, like the first ingredient is apples. And not that apples are not bad, right? But what happens is they take, to get into that whole bottle of a smoothie, they have to take a lot of apples, a lot of oranges, a lot of bananas. They maybe put some greens in there. They have to mix it all up and put it in there. And what ends up happening is it's mostly just the sugar. Some of those bottles have like 56 grams of sugar, which is equivalent to like a 20-ounce bottle of Coca-Cola. Yes, you're getting vitamin A and vitamin C. You're getting nutrition there, but you're getting so much sugar, you're losing the dietary fiber, which is the benefit to consuming all those fruits and vegetables. And you're consuming maybe 250 calories and not even feeling full from it. And if you were to have actually used that money, spent it by buying fruits and vegetables and left them in their whole form, you would have eventually felt full, and it would have helped with your satiety, if your goal is weight loss or just general healthy eating, or improved energy. Like, you'll do much better if you actually eat whole pieces of fruit or have something like, vegetables on your plate. Like, there's no reason why we need to continuously juice or put our fruits and vegetables into a smoothie form.
Well, what about if you were to make your own? Like, you were to
And
buy
so-
an apple and some kale.
Right.
and-
So when you make your own, it's a little better because then you can measure your portions of it, and you can balance it out. So when it comes to having, like, if you're having it as a meal replacement, you definitely want to make sure there's some sort of protein in there. And I think a lot of people will just put together, they'll throw in some fruit and maybe some spinach and like water or unsweetened almond milk or something, and they call that a breakfast. Honestly, for me, that would be more like a snack. It's not really filling and satiating. And once again, it doesn't really have much substance there. Versus like if you wanted to make it a meal, then you want to make sure that you're having things like maybe milk that has protein, so cow's milk or soy milk, or using a protein powder or maybe a yogurt, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And then make sure you're measuring your fruit, like maybe a cup of fruit and like a cup of spinach, like a cup of berries and a cup of spinach, versus just like a banana and blueberries and apples and a little bit of spinach, and it's like mostly fruit and not vegetables, where we really we should be consuming more vegetables than we do fruit. So that's kind of what I would say. It's like, you're definitely better off making it from home. If you're going to buy something, take a look at the serving size. A lot of those juices and smoothies, there's like 3 or 4 servings in a bottle. So here you are thinking I'm having like 9 grams of sugar, but really you're having 55 grams of sugar because there's multiple servings in the bottle.
Right. So now, what about granola bars. Those are healthy, right?
Yeah, that's a great one. And I'm going to be really honest with you guys. Like, so I started my own journey, before I went to school to become a registered dietitian. I was in high school doing this on my own. And I mean, I went from a Pop-Tart to a Nature Valley granola bar, and that's still an improvement, right? But also a granola bar really is, once again, it's going to be, even though it's granola, you would think it's like a whole grain, and so there would be fiber in there. If you take a look at something like a Nature Valley bar, the fiber is minimal. I think it's like 2 grams. It's a lot of sugar. The sugar's in double digits, right? So I always tell people to try to keep their sugars less than 10 grams per serving. The serving size is 2 bars, and you think that, it's 1 bar, and you end up having 2 bars. So you have it ends up being mostly sugar, a little bit of fat, not much protein, and it's not really ideal. Or even something like, 100 calorie, like chewy bars or something like that. There's mostly they can have like chocolate or raisins, and it ends up once again mostly sugar, not much dietary fiber, not really filling or satiating, and so it's not always going to be the best alternative. However, I will say, if you were someone like me who used to have Pop-Tarts as a snack and now you're having a granola bar, okay, you're making an improvement, but there's definitely better options. Maybe something like a Kind bar, where it has it's more like nuts and seeds and a little bit of chocolate, so there is some sugar there but not too much. That could be a better alternative.
So a couple things about that. What about if you were to just get plain granola? You want something like that, but you just buy a raw granola or just plain granola.
Yeah. So there's so many varieties, and that's a really great question. In general, traditionally, granola tends to be very similar, kind of higher in sugar and fat.
Is that added sugar?
Yes.
Yeah,
so they usually add. So then they have
that is very low sugar.
Yes, you can. But in general, the serving size, if you take a look of granola, it's calorically dense, meaning that like a serving size might be a quarter cup, and it could be 150 calories. Most people aren't having a quarter cup. If you look at the palm of your hand, your fist size is 1 cup, so a quarter cup would be like kind of the tops of your fingertips. It's not much. But people hear granola is good, and what they do is they have it like as their cereal, and they have like a bowl of cereal, so they're having like 500, 600 calories worth of granola, and that's not really what we want to be doing. Versus like having granola can be great, especially for athletes, people who are trying to gain weight in a healthy way. It actually can fit, but the thing is, it's like, you have to think about what your goals are. So someone who is trying to lose weight, that wants a little crunch, that wants something that's a little healthy, but don't think it's the best thing for you, sprinkling that on top of like your yogurt or with some fruit can be a great thing to add. But having it as like a bowl of cereal, chances are you're probably overdoing it with the sugar and the fats.
So speaking of cereal, I find that some, there are some that are supposed to be healthy, some that are not. Clearly, like Frosted Flakes is not very healthy, but there are some that I've heard.
What do you mean? They're great.
I got teased. My name's Toni. Oh God, Toni the Tiger, 6th grade. Never forget it.
So,
I'm great.
So look, it's either that or it's Just in Time or George Ryan or.
Yeah, exactly.
So
we all get something.
Something.
Yeah, Just Incredible. There was a wrestler named Just
I came up with that one.
Well, no, there was a pro wrestler.
I know. So that's when everyone ever references says like Just in Time or Just in Case. I always say, look, I prefer Just Incredible. Thank you.
All right, so anyway, tell us about cereals. Like, what are there healthy cereals? Are there not? Is it bad like me where you find a healthy cereal but then you have like 18 servings of it? Like what would you say about?
Well, serving size is always, that's the whole, like serving size and portion size is always dependent on the person and the goal. In general, the more boring flavored ones are going to be better for you. So, basically what I tell people, a good cereal guideline is to read what the sugar is. So we never want the sugar to be in double digits, like I said. So under 10 grams per serving. The fiber should be at least 3 grams. So a lot of times these cereals will claim to be whole grain, like Lucky Charms, for example. Yeah, it's a whole grain cereal, but the fiber isn't at that point, and the sugar's totally up there. So it's not really like a great option. Things like Raisin Bran, the raisins are coated in sugar, and raisin as a dried fruit naturally has sugar. There's no reason why we have to coat those raisins in sugar. So yes, if you're going from I was a Frosted Flakes girl. I love Frosted Flakes. They were my favorite. But I recognized, I learned when I was young, I started reading labels. The sugar was there. So I would do like half frosted flakes, half corn flakes, or like half Cheerios, let's say. And then I would slowly start to then go from Honey Nut Cheerios with regular Cheerios to just regular Cheerios. Now I would say your best bet is to get the kind of boring bland cereals, maybe add some ground cinnamon, fresh fruits. You're adding a natural sugar that has the fiber. And yes, read the serving size, make sure you're consuming what you actually think you're consuming.
Are you of the belief that generally the hot cereals are a little better because they don't have, not the ones with the prepackaged, with the sugar in them, but just like straight oatmeal or, some sort of cream of wheat that has no sugar in it?
Right. So usually, so that's a good point. Oatmeal is a great one. I have a lot of people that tell me that they eat oatmeal in the morning, and I find out that they're eating the ones that are like peaches and cream, or which I did this too. I think back at it when I was in high school, I was really trying. And like, once again, I went from having like a croissant to a sugar-laden oatmeal. So I think a sugar-laden oatmeal is actually better than a croissant, but still not great. So you learn and you read and you apply and you change. But yes, so usually plain is usually best, but then oatmeal is going to be better than farina because of the dietary fiber. Or like, what do I eat now? It's really good. It's a mixture of like quinoa flakes and it's like a mixture of stuff. But yeah, so plain is obviously always going to be the healthiest, but that doesn't mean it needs to be boring. Like you can sweeten it in natural ways. Like the thing is with even things like honey, right? It's a natural sweetener, but it's still sugar, but at least you can control how much you put in and you can see it versus just like getting something that has sugar already in it. It's more or less being knowledgeable and in control of your food.
So speaking of other kind of blandish things that we add lots of sugar to make it more palatable, how about yogurt?
Oh, yeah. So with yogurt, there's so many different varieties. Very similar to the cereal aisle is a whole aisle. When you go to buy yogurt, there's like cases and cases and cases of different options. Most of the time, especially actually I would say like your yogurt alternatives for people who are dairy free, like so that are soy based or almond based or coconut based, those tend to have a ton of sugar, either a lot of fat or no protein, and it honestly it ends up being more of like a dessert, I would say, than it should be actually like something you would snack on. So same thing, very similar to the oatmeal or like the hot cereals and stuff. Plain is usually best. So I usually recommend plain Greek yogurt to most of my clients. And then I have them sweeten it naturally with fresh fruit, ground cinnamon, maybe a little bit of like a nut butter, like peanut butter, almond butter, something like that. And so, yeah, so
sort
it's
of
a little
obvious.
bit more
What about
tart,
those?
but
What about those yogurts that have the fruit underneath it?
So the fruit on the bottom, that's a great question. They tend to usually also have like a syrup to it. So that's what we would call added sugar. I will say though, if you're used to having in the middle of the day, like cake and cookies, and you go for a yogurt that has the fruit on the bottom, still a better option. And at least there is some calcium, vitamin D, probiotics, protein. So in that situation, not the worst thing. Also, probably post-workout, that would be an excellent snack to have, because at that point, you do want that kind of quick energy sugar source with the protein. So post-workout, it could be a great option. But any other time of the day, not so much.
It might be nice to just get plain yogurt and put in fresh fruit. Right, might be a better option even than
but
that.
sometimes you don't have the time.
Well, but
that's true.
Well, yeah, you might not have the time to do it, but yeah, that would be ideal. But post workout, actually, you want the simple sugar. So like that actually, yeah, I mean, fresh fruit would be good too. But the fact that it's kind of in a syrup is going to be more utilized by the body.
And then what about Justin's favorite thing in the world, froyo?
Frozen yogurt. Oh my gosh, I used to eat that a lot too. You learn so much. You learn so much. So frozen yogurt. So yeah, it will be probably a little bit lower in fat and sugar than say ice cream. But in general, it still has a lot of sugar. It's still a sweet treat. So not that you can't have it, but you still want to, just because it's frozen yogurt doesn't mean you get a large, right? You just get it. You still get either a small or a mini size or whatever it is. And then your toppings. Be careful of your toppings. Just because you're having froyo and it's a little bit better than ice cream doesn't mean you can now top it with, gummy bears and
That's what I do.
chocolate chips and
Cookie dough.
caramel
So
syrup.
I'll do cookie dough, gummy bears, the Nutella topping, and then those like hazelnut wafers, because I can't get enough hazelnut.
Yeah, and I think not all froyo is created equal too. If you go and you go to the places, they have froyo that is 80 calories a serving, and the froyo that is 160 or 200 calories.
Yeah, but
a
the
serving.
ones that usually are better for you don't taste as good.
Yeah, you just
I like
rationalize
the
it.
plain ones. I like the sort of plain
It's
ones.
similar to the other stuff, but yeah, no, that's true. I just want people to be aware. It's like, I remember honestly, like when I was in high school, I would have frozen yogurt for lunch thinking I was having a better option. Like I really did. But also that was what I was taught.
So now
What was around me.
there are two things that people kind of buy, that they use as like, oh, well, I had this, so it must not be that bad. One is salad, which we hear people say all the time. Well, I had a salad. I had a bacon cheeseburger and I had a salad. So maybe this is a different subject, but almost like, do salads have a negative effect? So can you eat a salad to make up for your French fries? And then B, can you have not all salads, I guess, are created equal. But also people do the same thing with wraps. Like they'll say, I had a wrap. I didn't have a sandwich. I had a turkey club or whatever, but it was a wrap. It wasn't a sandwich. So maybe you could talk about salads and wraps and whether or not they can be unhealthy.
Absolutely. Well, I'll start with wraps just because it's easy. So a lot of people think that, like you said, wraps are better than having a sandwich, but actually a lot of tortilla wraps actually have more carbohydrates than like 2 slices of bread would. It's very similar to like a bagel. So it doesn't make it good or bad. It just you want to be mindful of that your portions and your calories are probably going to be larger when you use a wrap versus having like 2 slices of whole grain bread or whole wheat bread are going to be a better alternative.
Yeah.
And
You
about
could also
this,
do a lettuce wrap where lettuce becomes your wrap.
you could do that. You can do that. But so when it comes to salads, I mean there's so many ways to create a salad, and just the term salad doesn't make it healthier or not, right? I think we talked about this maybe 2 years ago when I first on the podcast. I remember
Like a taco
at the
salad,
place of
for
my
instance.
work, like there was someone and she was eating her lunch and she literally, it was just like ranch dressing and iceberg lettuce. And like, that's not a salad. Yeah, technically it's a salad, but a salad really should be colorful, a myriad of colorful, different nutrient dense foods that are coming together. So that could be, doesn't even have to have lettuce, honestly. Yeah. You could have a quinoa salad, right? But in general, if you wanted to build a healthy salad, let's say with lettuce there, then the darker the greens, the better. Throwing in lots of your non-starchy vegetables like peppers and cucumbers and cucumbers and tomatoes. That's going to be great. Your dressing definitely matters. You want to do maybe like olive oil based or like something kind of fresh, maybe lemon juice. If you're going to use hummus, I do that a lot. I'll make my own dressing really quick. I'll do like a little bit of hummus that gives it that creaminess. And lemon juice and maybe a little bit of like red wine vinegar. So there's a bunch of different ways to do a salad. You want to definitely be careful of the things like the dressings, adding every little bit does add up, right? So we add a little bit of like bacon bits here, maybe some eggs here, maybe some cheese here, maybe some guac here, maybe, and then you have that and you have a wrap. That's like 2 meals, maybe even 3, because sometimes the wraps, like I said, they're like, it's lots of bread. So you just want to be careful. You want to be like mindful of like what's going in your salad. Is it balanced? Is it lean? And are you having it as a side or are you having it as your meal? And that's going to dictate what you put in it.
All right, so then there was, we still have a few more. Dried fruits. So, again, I don't get enough fruit intake, and I actually do this sometimes. And this is more just because I'm lazy, but I'll grab dried fruit. So what's wrong with that? Or is there
there's nothing wrong with it. You just have to be mindful.
No, there's something wrong with it. Tell Ryan he's being bad.
No. I don't know. So the thing is with very similar, like I was saying earlier, like to get a cup of juice or to get a cup, like a smoothie made, right? To get a cup of orange juice. So 1 cup of orange juice, you need about 3 or 4 oranges and to get out a cup worth of juice. But you would never really eat 3 or 4 oranges at one time because at that point you would feel full and it would, you wouldn't want to have it anymore. When it comes to fruit, it's basically like raisins, for example. You're going to have to take a cup of grapes to shrivel it up to get a 1/4 cup of raisins. And so the carbohydrates and the sugar is the same in a cup of grapes versus a 1/4 cup of raisins. The problem is most people don't just have a 1/4 cup of raisins. And now here they are like, are you going to gain weight? And you're going to like, is it the worst thing if you have an extra serving of raisins or even an extra servings of grapes? Absolutely not. However, it depends on what your goal is, and it's important to, pay attention to how the amount of what you're having. And so raisins would be another thing that I would say would be more like a sprinkle in your oatmeal or into your salad, but you don't want to just be having a handful of raisins.
Cool. And what about reduced fat muffins?
Oh my God, I did this. So when I was in high school, I started changing my eating habits, and I didn't really read labels at first. At first, I just did what I thought would be better. So, I knew that I used to get blueberry muffins from Dunkin' Donuts. I love muffins.
Yeah,
they are amazing. And the blueberry muffins, by the way, there's blueberries, so it has to be good for you. So, but the tops are like coated with sugar. But so I was like, okay, let me get a reduced fat blueberry muffin. That would be better. So I did that for a while. Then I started to read what was inside of the muffin and just muffins in general. And I found, and it's true, muffins usually have a lot more sugar and fat, and they're not filling. So it's not like there's a ton of fiber. And sometimes you're actually better off having a donut than you are having a muffin. If you're going to have a treat, it's like this. It's perceived as like a breakfast option, but it's really a dessert. It's like cake.
Yeah, muffin is just another.
It's
word
like,
for cake.
yeah. So whether it's reduced fat or, full fat or whatever, a muffin is a muffin. It's like ice cream and frozen yogurt. Like, the one's a little bit better than the other, but they're still considered a sweet treat.
So I remember one time when Ryan and I was in high school, when we were in high school, and I'm sure we had eaten something. We had probably gone and eaten, a pizza pie between the two of us, or maybe bacon cheese, something like that. And Ryan's brother was with us. And I remember we were at some place. I don't remember when we went into a grocery store afterwards to get something to drink or gum or something. And I remember your brother saying, wait, this is healthy, right? And after we had already eaten some ridiculous meal, right? And he was holding up a bran muffin. He's like, this is healthy, right? I'm going to eat this. So we bought the bran muffin, and, the idea of food canceling out.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what just popped up into my mind? Whole grain cookies.
Oh, well, that was the next thing. I guess you could talk about whole grain cookies and then multigrain
Because he
bread.
said bran muffin, which, technically would be a little bit better than the other ones, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't cancel out.
But
like
it's
the 6
still a
slices
muffin.
of pizza you just
It's
ate.
still, not either. No. But also, too, like I see a lot of people like, it's a whole wheat cookie. So it's still a cookie.
Yeah.
It's better. And especially also, too, like if you make this stuff from scratch versus you buy it without still better for you. I'm all for it. It's just, it's all about portion control, to be honest. Because their sweets are sweets and they're not supposed to be consumed in large quantities.
And about that, you've seen over the last maybe 10 years or so this influx of different types of sweeteners, right? And I'm not talking about artificial sweeteners, which is a whole other deal, but stuff that is lesser glycemic index. So coconut palm sugar is a popular one, and they'll advertise it as less calories than white sugar, than refined sugar, or lower glycemic index. So, all right, maybe it's a somewhat better option, but this is what I always thought about that. It's still sugar.
Correct.
Right?
Even things
Any
like
way
honey.
you look at it.
Yep. Agave
right?
nectar.
And to make your food as sweet, it's going to require more of that type of sugar, because generally those sugars are not as sweet as refined sugar.
Right.
So to achieve the same taste would require more sugar, which almost negates the calorie.
Yes.
Right. So if you're going to couldn't you conceivably just use less refined white sugar?
Yeah.
So I always thought that was funky, that you're eating, it's not white sugar, it's not refined sugar, right? It's coconut palm sugar or whatever, anything else, but it's still it still functions the same way. And couldn't you just eat less sugar?
Yeah, you absolutely could. Also, that just made me think of people believing that sugar in the raw, because it basically sugar in the raw versus refined sugar. Basically, sugar in the raw has molasses around it, and it's just a coating of color, and they're removing that, and it's still sugar.
Still sugar. If you like the taste of it, that's a different. Use it for that reason, but it's not healthier.
I used to like putting it on my iced coffee, and I liked eating and being able to chew the crystals when I was in high school, and I had all these sugar.
Sure.
So that was my preference, but the sugar is the sugar. Like you're still having the same amount of sugar per teaspoon as you would whether it be refined or whole.
Cool. So now, and then what about like whole grain bread or multigrain bread?
So we hear that Okay, so multigrain bread or multigrain products really just means multi, meaning many grains. So it could be a lot of many grains could be in there, and they could be mostly refined grains. It doesn't necessarily make it whole grain. So whenever you want to make sure that you're getting a whole grain product, you want to make sure you're reading the label. Does that mean multigrain things can be whole grain? Yes, but it also doesn't guarantee that it is. So you don't want to just go by what the front of the package says. You always want to read the nutrition facts label. And the purpose of eating things that are whole grain, or if you want something that's healthy, that's multigrain, is you want that dietary fiber. So we want the fiber to be at least 3 grams per serving, whether it's a slice of bread or maybe a cereal or something like that. 4 grams of fiber per serving or more would be ideal, but at least 3 grams, I would say. Or just take 2 different options and like compare. So if you have 2 pieces of bread, one could be whole grain or one could be multigrain. Which one per serving has more fiber? You might want to go that route.
Cool. And then what about a few more here? I'm trying to figure out which one's best. Turkey bacon.
Turkey bacon. Okay, so bacon in general, I would say a lot of people have the perception that if they add bacon to their sandwich, they're adding protein, but really they're adding fat. And so
You're adding taste.
And
right?
taste, yeah.
That's what
so
you're adding. Nothing.
It's not really.
And things that are not healthy.
Yeah. So, and then also bacon does have this it's a processed food, so there's things like people believe it's like linked to cancer, and honestly, we know with anything, there's not one food that makes or breaks the diet. Is it a processed food? Does most of it contain nitrates? Usually, can you get one that's nitrate free? Yes, you can. With that being said, you're going to have things like bacon is made from pork, which is pig. Then they'll get a turkey bacon, which tends to be leaner, so it'll have less fat. However, turkey bacon usually you'll see the sodium ends up being higher to compensate for flavor. And all those other factors that I just talked about, possibly it being really processed, lots of nitrates, mostly fat, like still there. It still doesn't really, similar to the frozen yogurt and the ice cream or the regular muffin and the reduced fat muffin or the cookies and the whole grain, it's not that much of a difference. So I would just say it depends on what your goal is. And if you're having it, then you still don't want to have like tons of it. But yeah, so going from regular bacon to reduced fat bacon, it might be regular bacon to turkey bacon, it might be a little better for you, but it's really more of just a personal preference, I would say.
I think turkey bacon's disgusting. But
it doesn't crisp the same. I don't eat either of them, but I make it for my friend and it doesn't.
Yeah, no, like you want, for me, it's like I want crispy bacon or no bacon.
Yeah.
All right, so now how about sports drinks? Very common, obviously, for athletes and people working out. Are those as good for you as kind of advertised?
So for athletes that are exercising for an hour and a half or more, or if you're just, really, you're big in the gym, then a sports drink, especially something like Gatorade, it really is studied and tested. And it's a great replenishment for someone who's competing at a high level. But for the everyday person just going to the gym, chances are you probably don't need a sports drink like a Gatorade, or a Powerade or anything like that. If you are, then just be careful of reading the nutrition facts label, like the serving. So, some of those Gatorades have 2.5 servings each, right? So you probably don't need that whole entire thing after your workout. Gatorade has a G2 now, which I think is good because it has still has the sodium, the potassium, the electrolytes, but not as much as the sugar. And I think it's good for someone who, you go to the gym 3 to 4 days a week, you go for about an hour, you sweat a little bit. You're watching your nutrition, and so you want a little bit of something that would be fine. But it's a little bit. It obviously depends on the person and their training style. But I would say it's a little bit more for those people that are doing more high intensity sort of training than just your everyday average Joe.
Right, cool. So we're pushing.
I'm gonna mention one that Ryan skipped over, and because I think it's somewhat important.
How do you know I skipped over? I'm not done.
Because you just went lower on the list, so I'm assuming you skipped over. So it's popcorn, and I want to include some other snacks in there like pretzels or quinoa chips. And things like that, which are still. Well, I'll let you talk about those snacks.
Yeah.
We're pushing an hour and a half, so let's.
Well, I think it goes back to like just kale chips, let's say, for example, like, you know, or like you said, quinoa chips or things that like have like these words, quinoa, kale, they're very popular and healthy. And then they're in a chip form. They're still chips. They're a better alternative than say like Lay's potato chips, but they're still chips. So you still want to be mindful of your portions when you're consuming them. And then things like popcorn, there's so many different varieties. Like the popcorn in the movie theater, not going to be great. But the popcorn that you make, you know, on the stovetop or you buy that doesn't have a lot of added sugar, a lot of added salt or butter added to it, can be a great thing to do. What I do with those is if you don't love the flavor and they seem to be bland and boring, you can put a little bit of olive oil or like a olive oil type of spray and then add fresh seasonings like garlic powder, onion powder, a little bit of salt, maybe some pepper, whatever season, cumin, and you can really make your own popcorn from scratch that's flavorful but also still good for you.
And then I've got two more, and then we're done. So one is actually we didn't really bring it up, but I thought it came up to me. One would be vitamin supplements. You know that people tend to kind of lean on those, and whether or not that's effective, or you know if they're maybe you should just get it through your diet. And the other thing is kombucha, which I'm addicted to. So yeah, we'll give you
like
give us
kombucha?
our
I love
thoughts
kombucha.
on vitamin supplements and whether or not kombucha is really going to be great for my gut health and is like a miracle drink.
Okay. Vitamin supplements, we always want to do food first. If you have a deficiency, obviously, then you definitely want to have, you know, vitamin D, for example. Most people tend to be deficient. So taking a supplement of vitamin D that also has calcium to help with the absorption is going to be great. But just to take a general multivitamin is not going to hurt you, but it doesn't compensate for the fact that you might have a poor diet. So you still want to, it's a supplement. So it's be to use in conjunction with a healthy diet, almost like as a safety net. But you don't want to just be taking all these vitamins and minerals and not eating the food and thinking that, you know, that's what's doing it. So you're always, food first is always the, kind of the answer there. And then, kombucha. So I love kombucha. Kombucha, if nobody knows what it is, it's a fermented tea that contains probiotics, which is basically live bacteria to help support a healthy gut. When you have a healthy gut, you have a healthy immune system. I definitely want to have a guest on here to talk more about that because there's still new studies. We don't know, to be honest. That's the answer, Ryan. We're not sure how much probiotics play a role and how much you have to consume to help your gut, to help your immune system and all that. But we're learning, and it's a promising research, and it's growing. Kombucha, I would say, like it does have sugar, a little bit of sugar, because without the sugar, the bacteria doesn't survive. So you need the sugar in it.
But some have more sugar than others.
Right. So one bottle usually has about 16 grams of sugar, because you have to remember the bottles usually have 2 servings. So it'll say that it has 8, which is, like I said, below that 10 grams that I recommend, but it usually has a little bit more. I drink a whole bottle at one time just because I know the benefits of it. But anything more than that, I would probably say it's not necessary. I would just say I don't, and I can't answer that how much you need to drink. Some people don't consume any probiotics, and it makes them go to the bathroom. They don't have the tolerance up to consume it. So make sure that if you're starting to incorporate something like that, you know, maybe start with once a week and then slowly ease your way up, see how your body responds, and eventually it should adjust and it should support your gut.
It's true, because I drank kombucha once and then later I had to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, that's what happened.
So, I mean, I had to go to the bathroom. I don't know. Maybe I had to go to the bathroom anyway. Because you know that sometimes you just generally have to go to the bathroom in order to keep living.
Oh, leave it to you every time.
I like the fact that there's someone on this planet that appreciates my humor.
I do appreciate your humor. I wonder if other people do.
Probably not.
All right. I think it's time to wrap it up. What do you think?
Definitely. It's a long episode.
But it was fun.
But be
it was
careful with
action-packed.
wrapping it up, because you know that you might as well. Can we just bagel it up instead?
We need some sound effects.
But up.
Yeah, exactly. I've had to deal with this for 30 years? Oh, not 30, almost 30 years. All right. Well, that's it. All of our stuff is at TheGymWits.com. I will hopefully have put in the show notes links to all the stuff that we talked about today, because it was a lot. It feels like we've been talking for a while.
We might have to make this a 2-part.
No, because we already have part 2.
We are going to do a part
that's
2,
right.
by the way,
Yeah.
guys. We're doing a
Yeah.
part 2. We just did foods that are perceived as healthy but aren't so healthy. So we're going to talk about the foods that are kind of under the radar.
Foods that get a bad rap.
Or foods that get a bad rap that ends up being.
All right, let's end this before.
Oh God.
Okay. All right. I'm Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, aka Chef Sonic, reminding you that truth does not sell.
And I'm Toni Marinucci, aka Tips with Toni, a registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time.
And we are the GymWits.
GymWits. All right, guys, I know that was a very, very long episode. However, I know that you got a lot of value out of there. We try to jam pack it there in the GymWits. If you like the longer episodes, definitely go and subscribe to the GymWits because we have a lot of interview style stuff, more conversational sort of things, rather than the quick tips you get with me here. And if you love us a lot, and if you like my podcast, Tips with Toni, a lot, please write a review. It allows people to find the podcast, which means that person is one step closer to living a healthier lifestyle. Anyways, I don't want to keep this going. If you like what you heard, share it, write a review, whatever you got to do to keep this movement going. Thank you so much for listening. As always, you're listening to the Tips with Toni podcast. I'm Toni Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time.